The twin sons of Draven, 9 had just begun to retreat behind the jagged crystal cliffs when Mara stepped out of the shadowed cavern. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the deserted settlement below. The air was thick with a metallic tang, a residual scent of battles past. In her hands, wrapped carefully in the soft membrane of the alien plant known as Lumiflare, were 5 knives. Each blade shimmered with a faint, violet glow, resonating with a power only the old tinkerfolk could invoke. She knelt by the small figure huddled against the wall. The child was not like any human child she had ever known. Its skin shimmered with iridescent scales, reflecting the dying light of the twin suns, and its large, black eyes were eerily intelligent. Mara extended the knives slowly. These are for you," she whispered. The alien child tilted its head, curious yet cautious. It was a gesture of trust, a gesture Mara knew could either save or doom them both. The settlement was silent, but Mara could feel the presence of something monumental approaching. The Queen, whose name alone sent entire star systems into panic, was coming. She would arrive before dawn. The Queen's wrath was legendary. She was both a ruler and a predator, her fleet capable of annihilating a planet in the time it took to blink. And yet, Mara had a plan, however fragile it might be. 2 days earlier, Mara had stumbled upon the settlement while evading the Queen's patrols. She was a tinker by trade, but she had a past she never spoke of, a past of rebellions, of betrayals, of secret wars fought in shadows. The child, whom the settlers called Lyra, had been left alone, a target for the Queen's forces. Lyra's species, the Veari, were renowned for their psychic abilities, and the Queen had seen them as a threat to her empire. Mara had watched the Queen's soldiers sweep through the settlement, their sleek exocets glinting under Draven 9's harsh suns. She had stayed hidden, her mind racing, knowing that running was not an option. The child's safety depended on her, and the only hope she could muster lay in the 5 knives, forged not from steel but from a rare alloy that resonated with psychic energy. Mara had spent weeks crafting them in secret, imbuing each with an aspect of defense, attack, and, most importantly, protection. "You must learn quickly," Mara told Lyra as she fastened the knives to a small belt around the child's waist. "Each one has a purpose. Remember, control your fear. Control your power. The Queen will come." Lyra's small hand gripped the handle of the first knife, its scales quivering with anticipation. Mara smiled faintly. "Good. That's a start." Night fell fast on Draven 9. Mara and Lyra hid within the labyrinth of crystal canyons, where shadows stretched like living entities. Mara whispered stories to keep the child calm. Tales of ancient tinkerfolk who had tricked entire fleets of conquerors, stories of impossible escapes, of daring gambits. But even as she spoke, Mara felt a creeping dread. The Queen's fleet had entered the system, its ominous silhouette darkening the horizon. The first strike came as a wave of psychic resonance, rippling through the canyons. Mara steadied Lyra, who instinctively lifted the knives. Each blade reacted differently, glowing in a sequence that Mara had meticulously designed. The knives amplified Lyra's innate psychic energy, forming a barrier that absorbed the Queen's assault. Mara watched, heart hammering, as the child's power pulsed, bending reality itself in a subtle, terrifying display. "You're ready," Mara whispered, almost to herself. She could feel the Queen's presence as surely as one feels a storm before it breaks. And yet, even as fear threatened to paralyze her, Mara knew that the child held the key, not just to their survival, but to challenging the Queen herself. By the time the first rays of the twin suns touched the canyon floors, the Queen had arrived. She descended from her massive ship, her silhouette casting a shadow over the settlement that was both regal and terrifying. Her eyes, black as void, scanned the canyon until they rested on Lyra. The child stood still, 5 knives gleaming in the dawn light, a beacon of defiance against an empire that had never tolerated rebellion. The queen's voice reverberated, not through air, but through the mind. "Child, why do you defy me?" Lyra's response was silent, a psychic echo that Mara felt in her own chest. "Because fear is not power. Courage is." Mara realized in that moment that the knives were not just weapons, they were conduits. Each one amplified Lyra's courage, her defiance, and her connection to the world around her. With a graceful motion, Lyra threw the knives in a pattern Mara had never taught, yet somehow the child knew exactly how to strike. The knives formed a lattice of energy, creating a prism that bent the queen's psychic assault back upon her. The queen faltered, her hand pressed against her temple as the psychic feedback grew unbearable. Mara seized the moment. She hurled herself toward the queen, armed with only a small, experimental device that could amplify Lyra's energy. The device hummed, resonating with the knives, and a shockwave erupted. The queen's fleet shook as if a giant hand had struck it. Lyra moved with a fluid, unearthly grace, her knives dancing in the air, their energy weaving a pattern that encased the queen in a cage of light. The queen's roar, something between rage and disbelief, echoed across the canyon. She was trapped, her own power reflected back at her. Mara watched, breathless, as the impossible unfolded. Hours passed like minutes, and by mid-morning, the queen's fleet had retreated. The settlement was battered but intact. Mara knelt beside Lyra, inspecting the child for injuries. Lyra's eyes, wide and alert, reflected both exhaustion and triumph. The knives, now dimmed, hummed faintly as if acknowledging their task was complete. "You did it," Mara said softly. Lyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment without needing words. The queen had been defeated, not destroyed, but humbled. And that was enough. The child had survived, had proven that even the most feared entity in the galaxy could be resisted with courage, skill, and a little ingenuity. As Mara and Lyra watched the suns climb higher, a quiet bond formed between them. They were unlikely allies. One human, one alien, united by circumstance and choice. Mara realized that the knives, the danger, and the queen's wrath had not just tested Lyra, they had tested her as well. She had learned that the greatest strength was not in power or weapons, but in trust, guidance, and the willingness to act when fear threatened to paralyze. Weeks later, as Draven, 9 began to rebuild, Mara crafted new knives, this time for herself, not for Lyra. She had a new mission, to train, to prepare, and perhaps one day to confront the queen on her own terms. Lyra, for her part, had grown into a symbol for the Veari, a reminder that even the smallest being could defy tyranny. The settlement flourished quietly, its people inspired by the courage of the child and the human who had believed in her. Mara sometimes wondered what the queen would do next. But she also knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came, they would be ready. For now, they had 5 knives, a dawn of hope, and the knowledge that courage could carve a path through even the darkest of empires. Ending scene, as night fell on Draven. 9 once more, Mara and Lyra stood on the cliffs overlooking the settlement. The stars sparkled with quiet indifference to mortal struggles, but Mara felt a serene defiance in the air. Lyra turned, her eyes glimmering with a faint violet light. "We did it," she said simply. "Yes," Mara replied, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. "And tomorrow we continue." The twin suns rose again, painting the horizon with gold and lavender. In the distance, a faint shimmer indicated the retreating shadow of the Queen's fleet. But Mara no longer feared it. She had given the child 5 knives, yes, but more importantly, she had given her the power to stand. And that was a gift the Queen could never take away.